October 5th, a Monday, and here we are with episode number 552. My guest today is Paul Camarata, owner of one of the most legendary recording studios in America, Sunset Sound. Let me just give you a list of who's who that's worked in this studio. Just real quick, you might have heard of these people: Prince, The Doors, Led Zeppelin, Van Halen, Rage Against the Machine, Elton John. I mean, it is unreal when you walk through these studio doors and see the gold and platinum records up on the wall. And to hear this man's story and his father's story was an honor. I was in the studio. I recorded this episode right in the same room that Jim Morrison sang every Doors song, every one of them. And it is unreal. The same room where Exile on Main Street did all the overdubs. I'm talking about Jagger and Richards just in there after leaving France. And I mean, the stories are on and on. And you are going to love this episode. Even if you don't care about recording studios, you are going to love everything about this. Because what you don't understand is most people don't know this, but a record that you love, let's say it's Prince, Sign of the Times. Let's say it's Led Zeppelin 4, Stairway to Heaven. You love that record. You love the songs and you love the band. But you know what else you love and you don't really think about it? Is the sound. And the reason you don't think about it is because it sounds fantastic. If it sounded like shit, you would talk about it every day. This sounds like shit. I've never had a legendary classic record that sounded like shit and it was still legendary. Not that I mean, maybe some of the punk rock stuff, not that it sounds like shit, but I'm talking lo-fi or homemade, that kind of stuff. But the great records, there's that chemistry. There's lightning in a bottle. You got an incredible band. Then you have the chemistry of the songwriting. And then you have the studio. That is such a massive part of music. A massive part. And the people that own these studios and the people that work at them and the engineers, the technicians, the person that answers the phone, the runner, all of them are all part of a fantastic record. So to be able to go in and sit down and interview Paul, it was epic. And in all my life of being in and out of the music business and hanging around with musicians and everything, I've never been in this place. I couldn't believe I'd never been in it. I've been in all the legendary studios pretty much. You know, Conway, Sound City, The Village, the major ones that you always hear about. I had been in them, but never been in this place. Drove by it probably a billion times, right by the old Amoeba, rest in peace, Amoeba. And it was just an amazing day. Thank you, Paul. And also thank you, Drew Dempsey, for setting this up. An old friend of mine. And I want to thank you, buddy, for making this happen. Let's see here. Before we do get into it, I want to thank the new Patreoners: Andy Sandlin, Aaron Mayer, Thaddeus Selick, Mario Molina, and Frank Bernacki. Thanks for being brand new Patreoners. Awesome. Patreon.com/Dean Del Rey. 91 bonus episodes and all kinds of other goodies like Zoom Fest, which is a weekly live Zoom I do with the Patreoners. And last week, they got a little surprise comedy show I hooked them up with, which was very cool. People from around the world finally got to see me do some stand-up that were Dale Razors for many, many years and have never seen me do stand-up. So yeah, Patreon, join it up. Also, if you are a new listener here, please leave a review on iTunes and subscribe. Tap that little review button and leave one there because it definitely helps. And the YouTube channel, Dean Del Rey YouTube channel. We're a couple weeks away from the other podcast that I'm going to be doing, the second podcast, and more info on that coming soon. So stay tuned. And also a ton of amazing episodes coming up, like this one here. I did 8 podcasts this week, recorded them. 8. I am zapped, my friends. I am zapped. Have a great week. Don't forget to watch the Comedy Store documentary on Showtime. And also, what else? Oh, yeah. Big shout out love to Comedy Store paid regular Punky Johnson for her debut on Saturday Night Live this last Saturday, which is amazing. She is a part of that cast, that legendary show. Punky, right on. And next week, the great Bill Burr will finally be hosting SNL. So, wow. Congrats to my man, Bill Burr, for that. That is beyond cool. And I know that's definitely another highlight in his career that he can check off, which is great. All right, I love all you, man. Stay healthy and sane out there. Don't forget to vote. Keep the candles lit. Thank you, Paul, for doing the show. Here it is right here. A little trip into sunset sound. All right, welcome to another episode of Let There Be Talk. Fantastic guest today. I'm coming to you live from one of the most world-famous recording studios on the planet. And I know if you listen to music from the 70s and the 60s, it was done right in this studio right here. Introduce yourself.
Hey, Dean. Nice to be here. I'm Paul Camarata. I'm the owner of Sunset Sound Recorders. My father started the business back in 1960. And this was originally, we're in Studio One right now, and this is the original room that was first to come online. And this was basically a Disney studio. This was strictly for his use. He, in 1958, he got the job from Walt to start the Disneyland Records division of Walt Disney, and because they didn't have a record company. So he got that gig, and he moved us out from New Jersey.
Did he know Walt as like a friend, or was it an ad in the newspaper?
It was a recommendation, from my understanding, because he had started Decca America.
Your dad did?
Yeah.
Wow.
He had gotten the job. He was at one time living in London and working with artists on Decca in London.
Is that the Beatles, Decca? Who was on Decca?
So Decca was London Records, where the Stones were.
Right.
Decca is now Universal, part of Universal. But Decca was a big, formidable label back then. And he got, when he was, working for the CEO, which I think was Sir Edward Lewis. Nobody will know who that is. But he got the gig to start Decca America. So he came to America and did a lot of artists on that label.
So Decca America was running out of Jersey?
No, I think it was in New York City, but we were living in Jersey.
And how did your dad get into the record business?
Oh, that goes way back. So his first gig was being the arranger and trumpet player for the Jimmy Dorsey band when he was like a teenager.
Wow.
And he went to Juilliard School of Music in New York City, and that's how he learned how to, I think, write music and arrange, and probably got his conductor chops that way too. So that was his first thing. But fast forward, I mean, to the 40s, and this is after the war, he was working for Decca in London, and they offered him a gig to start a record company in the States. So he came over, and let me think, these people probably don't mean much to many people, that's so long ago, but he did this woman, Vera Lynn, I guess it was a big act for Decca. He did the Ted Heath Orchestra. He did,
And what did he do for them? Was he producing them? Was he writing music for them?
I think he was writing arrangements and producing them.
Gotcha.
So that was all on the Decca label.
And somebody catches wind and hits up Walt Disney.
I think, somebody mentioned to Walt when he wanted to start a record company is you should talk to Tutti Camarata because he's got a background, quite extensive background in that area, and I think it would be a good match for you. So I guess he came out and interviewed with Walt, and they gave him the job. And that was like 1958.
How old were you at the time?
Oh, I was 4 or 5 years old.
So you don't have deep roots in Jersey, so you're moving to California. Where do you guys land? Right here in Hollywood?
Yeah, we did. I think our first place we stayed at was the Hollywood Hawaiian. It's still there. It's just this little hotel off of Wilcox, and it's not called the Hollywood Hawaiian anymore.
Or it's got to be gnarly now.
Yeah, it's just, it actually still looks kind of nice. One of my guys here actually lived there for a while and said it was a pretty nice place. They had a swimming pool and, kind of little kitchenettes. And
so you guys land there?
We land there, and then I think we lived in Westwood for a while. I vaguely remember that. You gotta remember, I was just a little boy. And then we moved to Studio City.
Oh, where at?
We lived on Sunshine Terrace. That was our first house. We lived on Sunshine Terrace, and then we moved over to Fryman Canyon, where everybody hikes and everything.
Yeah.
And then I still live in Studio City. I live up in the hills, and it's such a rural place. I mean, when I was growing up, we all had the mini bikes and riding around in the hills and the fire trails, and it was great. And there was no hikers, there was none of that.
I was saying that the mini bike is the first taste of freedom for a male fifth, sixth grader.
Yep.
That McCullen's motor, pull.
Oh, I know.
Barely any brakes.
Yeah, I think I was 10, 11 years old, had one of those things. Buzzed all around the neighborhood, the cops never really gave you a hard time.
No.
And, go visit all my friends. And then we go up in the hills and ride them on the dirt trails, and it was a blast.
So your dad's out here, and does Walt say, I want you to write music, or what's going on? Because
he's out here, and he goes, I want you to start the label. And he goes, here's what we're going to do for the label. There's multiple facets. One is we have to do some production for some of the rides at Disneyland.
Right, like Small World, the stuff with music.
Yeah, stuff
Country
with music.
Bear Jamboree.
Yeah, but it was prior to that, so it was kind of like Adventureland or, Main Street or, I think even earlier than that.
Oh, wow.
So some of that stuff's apparently still being used down there.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing is Walt wants to start this television show, which he starts, the Mickey Mouse Club.
Oh, whoa.
And that was huge back then. They start this Mickey Mouse Club, and there's this little girl named Annette who becomes very popular. And so they went to my dad and said, I think she can sing, or let's get her to sing, and let's make some music with her, because she was so popular. So my dad was her producer, and from a teenager up to her early 20s, he produced all her records here at the studio.
Now, I don't want to jump too far classic onto that because I like the story of how they find the studio. So you're in Hollywood. Well, you're in Studio City.
So we're in Studio City. I'm still pretty young. And my dad is going to the studios here in town. So he's going to TTG. He's going to, which sort of is still there. He's going to Capitol. He's going to, I think it was Studio 55 or 56, whatever that place was. I think Elvis recorded there long ago. There was only a handful of studios in town.
Yeah, like the record companies had the studios back in the day.
Right.
Isn't
they
that
had
weird?
whether it was our RCA or Columbia or whatever. So there wasn't really any studios in town. This is prior to United Western. This is prior to most of the big studios that we've come to know here in Hollywood. So he's like, somehow, I remember him telling me, I can't get into these places. They're booked, and I think I have to start my own studio. So he goes to Walt, and he says, I got all this work. You've got me doing all this production for The Rides, Annette. I think he had started Annette already. He's doing stuff like Snow White. He's doing some of the film work. He's doing children's records, and he goes, I got to have a studio. And Walt goes, well, I don't want to build a studio on the lot. He said, I'm not interested in a recording studio. So I guess my father thought about it, went back to him and said, well, if you're not interested in a studio, what about if I build a studio? Can we run all the work through there? And Walt said, absolutely. Be glad to help you out even, and why don't you build the studio? So that's how Sunset Sound came to be. So he was driving around, and I guess he told me he kept seeing this building with a for sale sign up on it, which was this place on Sunset Boulevard. So he went in and talked to them, and it was a probate sale, I think, and the people had died or somebody. And he ended up buying it in early 60.
Early 60.
Early 60, bought the building.
Now, was it an automobile shop before?
No. Yes, it was. It was, but not when he bought it.
Right.
When he bought it, it was this room we are in now. It was kind of an animation studio or something to do with that. And this was a screening room. I remember they had a screen on the wall back there, and they had a projector here, and they had a wall through here. And it wasn't a recording studio at all. And up front was a photography studio where they were doing shoots, stuff like that.
Wow.
But none of it was active. It was all vacant at the time. Because I remember coming down here with him and walking around. I was probably 7 or 8 years old, something like that. But I do remember it.
Wow.
So he bought it, and then...
You know how much he bought it for?
Yeah, I think he bought it for somewhere around $50,000, which was a lot of money back in those days.
That's a lot of money in 1960.
That was a lot of money back in those days, because I remember when we sold the house on Sunshine Terrace before we moved over to Fryman, and I think we sold that for like $38,000.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I still drive by there every day because that's on my way home. But yeah, $50,000 was a lot of money for a building. And then, it's just a building. You got to turn it into a studio, which, making a studio in those days wasn't easy. A lot of people didn't know how to do that.
That's the thing I was thinking about today before I came over to see you was, I've worked in a lot of studios in my life, and then there's all these famous studios. We know them all,
Yeah.
And it seems to me it's a combination of course, it's the sound of the room, and then it's the engineer can completely ruin, you can have Van Halen 1, and then another guy comes in and it doesn't sound anything like Van Halen 1.
Right.
And then you have a bolt of luck, meaning the building has this vibe that something happens. Because when you look at this room, you have these guys in, and I don't think that they really, they understand acoustics, but not to the level of now where it's science, where they're laser and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going, this is the sound point, there's a lot of treble over here, and all that stuff, So back then it was just kind of, well, we build it and let's see what it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think part of it was luck. And this building, and especially this room, we were very fortunate that if you look at it, it really doesn't have any parallel surfaces. I mean, the ceiling slanted, the floor is slanted.
Yeah,
it runs down this way. And then, we've got hard brick surface on one side, softer carpet and wood on the other, and then we have these movable panels that we had put in. These are a little cosmetically changed, but still, that's what was there back in the day.
The brick wall, I can see that.
Yeah, so you could vary the acoustics of the room, make it brighter, make it softer, make it deader. And then, it was far enough back from Sunset Boulevard that we didn't get a bunch of noise bleed. Because, let's face it, nowadays, acoustics and the way that they can build a room are much improved than 60 years ago.
Oh, it's basically a room in a room.
Yes, a room in a room with a floating floor and everything like that. But this was not built that way. But it's quiet enough back here that we didn't get any bleed. So
your dad's he's rocking the Disney stuff, and it's starting to happen. And at what point does a rock band come in?
Well, so when he first opens up, we open up in like 61.
Right.
And I'm not sure when in 61, but sometime in 61. And we're strictly doing Disney. This is, we're doing The Wonderful World of Color. That was the thing that was on that Walt had every Sunday night. We're doing that. We're doing Snow White. We're doing some of the movies like Flubber, Son of Flubber, Legend of Sleepy Hollow, things, all this stuff. So this goes on for several years, and then people start knocking on the door, kind of like he did. Like, I need a studio to record.
Yeah.
So people start coming in probably around 63 to 4. And some of our early stuff that we did, that's post-Disney. Well, we're still doing Disney. But some of the early stuff we did, we did Jackie Wilson, Righteous Brothers, Sam Cooke, Martha and Vandellas, Nat King Cole, Dick and Dee Dee. These are all things in the early 64, 65 range. And we're still doing Disney. We did that film, How to Stuff a Wild Bikini.
Yeah.
We did that. We did The Monkey's Uncle. That's with the Beach Boys and Annette, and Frankie Avalon. And but people are coming through the door. We're doing The Ventures.
Are they hearing about it through town? Like, hey, there's this guy that's doing this, and maybe they got some downtime, because the Walt thing has to be like full blown at that time, because Walt is just pumping out films. He's got rides. He's got the TV shows.
Right. So the thing is, back then, a big draw was the house engineer.
Yeah.
Unlike now, they're
you bring your own guy now.
You bring your own guy usually, But the house engineer. So we had a couple of real formidable house engineers, and the main one being Bruce Botnick. So Bruce was doing all the Disney stuff, but he also, I think the word got out that he was a great engineer. So people were coming in to use him at night. So we do the Disney during the day, or actually we do commercials like J. Walter Thompson. We do Ford commercials or things like that during the day. Then do Disney, and then at night we do more of the pop rock stuff.
Wow.
And Bruce was working around the clock. He was, I don't know, probably sleeping on the couch here. He wasn't getting any sleep. So these people start wafting in, like those people I talked about, the early, and then, Cher's coming in, the Supremes are coming in, Jackie Wilson. Then I think the first big client that comes in, that camps out here, early 66. This is, he has A&M Records, and he brings in Brazil 66, he brings in Baja Marimba Band, he brings in the Sandpipers, he brings in Chris Montez. We do a couple Captain Beefheart records.
Wow.
Those are all on A&M. And he camps out here. And
there's only one studio at the
There's
time.
only one studio.
Right.
Up until right about now. There's only one studio. We're toying with building a second studio, but it's not really online yet. So, again, my father's like, I've been pushed out of my studio. It's like, I can't get in it, it's like we got to build a second studio. We got to get a second studio online.
Here's my question. Walt gives him the money to open the studio, but it's your dad's studio.
Correct.
So he's making some money, right? Like double money, triple money.
He's making some money. He's making some money, on the studio, but he's also making his, money from Disney.
Right.
Doing his,
And the commercials.
Yeah, and then so we got all these things going on, and then Herb's in here, and he goes to my dad. He goes, "I love this studio. I want to buy it."
Yeah.
And my dad goes, "Herb, it's like, if you buy it, where am I going to go? I need my studio." So Herb goes down the street and buys A&M, which is the old Charlie Chaplin studios. That was for sale. And then he builds his empire down there. So sometime in the mid-'60s, we don't see him anymore because he's got A&M.
What's that place called now? It's
Henson.
Henson, yeah.
Henson.
Yeah. A lot of famous stuff
with
done
the
in
Muppets.
there, too.
Oh, tremendous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tremendous campus, But so sometime in 1966, we get Studio 2 going.
You just build it like...
Well, we'd had kind of a demo studio in there, and it wasn't, with a funky, some sort of console we put together. I don't remember what that was. But my dad goes to England, and on a recommendation, I think, looks at this console called Sound Techniques, and he buys the first Sound Techniques that's ever imported in the United States, and we have it in Studio 2.
I saw it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It looked like a Neve.
Yeah, kind of. It's kind of like an early version of a Neve with those arc half-moon faders.
Yeah. Because when I saw it, I go, "Oh, look at this weird Neve," But and then you look at it and go, "Wait, this isn't a Neve."
No, it's Sound Techniques, and becomes a very popular console. It's a total departure for us. So a lot of people go in to use that just because of that console's in there, and then. The Doors are here recording in '66. That's
Now, how does that happen? Does
Well,
Paul Rothschild?
I should back up. Yeah. So what happens is, after Herb leaves, Paul Rothschild comes in here. I don't know really how sure. Probably comes because of Bruce Botnick. Bruce might have an insight on that, but he probably comes in here due to the fact Bruce is in or had heard other product being done here and said, I want to go in there and record. So he brings in the Electra family. So he starts doing all this Electra work. So some of the first things he did was the Doors, and I think they first came in August of '66 with him. And
well, that's right when I'm like born. I'm like 6 months old.
Yeah.
Now, are you hanging out at the studio at the time?
No.
What are you doing? Just going to school?
I'm going to school, but this is the mid '60s, and I'm a teenager, and
that hippie thing's starting to happen.
Yeah, and I'm listening to pop music. I mean, Doors records comes out. Wow, what a fantastic record! I mean, I come down to Hollywood. I don't remember how old I was, probably 15, and somehow snuck into the hullabaloo and got to see the Doors.
Ooh, wow.
And
you're going like, this was done at my dad's studio.
This is done at Sunset Sound. And so we're doing, the Doors, we're doing Love, one of their other big bands.
Another big Electra band.
Yeah, we did all their stuff.
Are you hanging out at all at the Whiskey, or are you just not?
No, I'm too young for that.
Right.
But I'm in junior high, but some of us would get out and go to an early show in Hollywood, and then curfew, you had to get home.
Yeah.
But couldn't get in the Whiskey. I think you had to be 18 then. But
now, on the first Doors record, Jim comes in here and trashes the joint on acid with a fire hydrant and destroys the board and everything. Is your dad losing his mind? I mean, because Jim is not a star yet, so you're like, who the hell is this dude?
Yeah, that's the first record. They're doing that. So I remember my father coming home and telling me that. So they had finished recording one night. They lock up. He leaves. He goes out, not sure, does something, gets out there. The story is that he goes into the church across the street, Blessed Sacrament. And he's in there and sort of has an epiphany or something. And he's alone, and he comes over here, scales the fence, gets in the courtyard, and breaks into the studio. And it's like, out of it and takes the fire extinguisher and starts shooting it all around in the studio. You know, his instruments, our stuff, whatever. He didn't go in the control room and really trash that. So he didn't trash the bulwark.
Oh, thank God.
So anyway, the hammer comes down the next day. They inform my dad, and they said, "Can you come down and meet the guys from Elektra, because they want to come down and talk to you? They're flipped out because they're worried."
Yeah. Yeah, they don't want to get kicked out.
Well, or sued. So Paul Rothschild comes down and brings the head of Elektra Records, which was Jack Holtzman. So they have a meeting with my dad, and they're expecting, I guess, a big scene. I don't know, some sort of, confrontation. And my dad was totally cool about it and said, "Hey, look, we cleaned it up. It wasn't that bad. And look, it's just that happens sometimes with musicians. And why don't we just get back to business?" And he
probably saw this like Elektra family, and he's got the second studio going now, and he's like, "We need all these bands coming through."
Yeah, that, and listen, he'd been on the road. He
knows what it's like.
He knows what it's like.
Yeah.
He saw this stuff. So he was just cool about it, and there wasn't any long-term damage. So we just got back to business and finished the first record into the next 5 here.
When the Doors record comes out and it's a monster hit, and of course Elektra's running their bands through here, is now the phone just ringing off the hook? Because there is that thing of in a lot of people's mind, oh my God, that studio's got the mojo. We got to get in there.
Yeah, the place is humming. I mean, it's. We got Studio 1 and Studio 2 going, and it's busy. And we're still doing the Disney stuff.
Right.
So, Elektra's, they're pumping other people through here. They're pumping Moby Grape. You remember them?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody on their roster. Then, I guess, Elektra's still humming along. Disney's still humming along. Then we start to get some other acts. Mainly Buffalo Springfield, which was on Atlantic. So they're in here working on pretty much most of they're working at other studios in town, but they're working on just about every record was worked on in here. Wow. I mean, we cut For What It's Worth in this room.
Wow.
That was a single that was released, and we did it start to finish in here. So, and Jimmy Messina did that. Jimmy Messina was a staff engineer.
Wow.
From Loggins and Messina days. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Jimmy actually left us, and I'm still friends with him, but he left us to go be in the Buffalo Springfield band.
Wow.
So he was working on the band, and one of the guys, a couple of the guys were Canadian, including Neil Young. And one of them gets busted for pot. I think it was the bass player, Bruce Palmer. I think that's who it was.
Yeah.
So he gets busted. So they deport him.
Whoa.
And go, well, back then, it was like pot. Ooh, back to Canada.
Canada, yeah.
So they're left without a bass player. So they knew Jimmy could play guitar, I guess. So they said, well, can you play bass? And he goes, yeah, I can play bass. And they go, well, you're hired then. We need you. So he thought that was a good opportunity, and it certainly was. So he left us. He left us to become a rock and roll star.
That's so funny, right?
Yeah.
He leaves like a good rock and roll day gig for a night rock and roll gig, and that band quickly breaks up. And kind of goes in two directions. One goes to Poco, which is where Jimmy went, and then the other half goes to Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young eventually. So it's a great time. At what point does your father retire and you take it over? In the early 70s? Or do you start working here?
No, I started working here. Well, I started working here in the late 60s, probably around 68, just sort of the cleanup kid.
Yeah.
The runner, the sweeper, the get the coffee, summers, working summers, trying to learn the business, working in the technical shop. They're teaching me how to solder, things like that. But not really engineering. A little bit, but not a lot of that. I don't think my father really ever wanted me to become an engineer.
Right.
Not that he would have stopped me, but he was like, we it'd be better if you didn't do that, because it was a tough road.
It's a grueler.
And it was, nobody. The hours were back then nobody had any regard for hours. They just worked.
Yeah,
20.
it's first in, last to leave.
Oh, exactly.
And you're just taking the abuse, and the fatigue of that is gnarly.
Yeah, and it's sometimes 7 days a week. And
zero glory.
Trying to have a relationship or something, it's impossible. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, that's sort of when I started to come to work here, and then. I didn't really come to work till probably after going to college for a while. So probably around 77 is when I...
Oh, wow.
76, 77 is when I really was here every day.
So you were you ever here on any of the Doors records, like hanging out, watching them track or anything?
No.
No.
My father wouldn't let me come down to him.
Oh, yeah.
I asked him, and he was like, no, no way. You cannot be on those sessions. I was like...
It's got to be also...
Well, I think I'm 13.
Yeah, and there's drugs going on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and, bad language, and, you name it, things like that. So, no, you can't be on that. So, no, didn't get to see that.
So you pop in the 70s. What, does your dad want to retire, or what's going on there?
No, he was always a very young man for his age. He never really wanted to retire, and he was always a musician. But he always wanted to do his stuff. And he had after Disney, he had a contract with London Records to do classical records. So he did like at least 10 albums on the London label, London Phase 4 label.
Whoa.
So he's trying to balance doing that with having the studio operating, and so I think he welcomed me to come in and help run it, because then he didn't have to rely on outside people as much.
Right.
But we had some great people here. But so I come in and I'm working full time, like by 76, 77.
So you're here working, and what happens? Ted Templeman comes in and goes, I got some new band. I'm going to bring them in here, and we're going to do a record, Van Halen 1. Are you around for that?
I'm around for that.
Wow.
Yeah. So he had come in
Montrose?
years ago.
Or Doobie Brothers?
Prior. He was in this band with Lenny Warnaker called Harper's Bazaar.
Oh, wow.
In 1968.
He was in that band?
Yeah, he was in that band.
Wow, I never knew that.
They had like one big hit,
Yeah, I know it.
And so he records that here. I think that's how he knew us. So he's pretty high up on the Warner Brothers company, and he's doing a lot of production for Warner's. So he starts coming in the mid '70s.
Who's he bring in? Doobie Brothers?
Well, not initially, but
Montrose.
Montrose. We did that Montrose record here.
Wow.
In October of 1971. Rock Candy.
I can't even believe how old that record is, because it's such a classic. But I talked about this before. I don't remember Montrose, Rock Candy, Bad Motor Scooter, that entire record until around 78-ish. So, and I talked to somebody about it. I can't remember who it was. So that thing was out for years before it really seemed to kind of hit with the rock kids. Because to me, I thought it came out in like 76, and then all of a sudden Van Halen goes, wow, that's a great record last year, and they start recording. But that's not the case. It's 71.
71. That's when we recorded it, October 71.
Man.
And also, he's doing Little Feat back then.
Wow, Little Feat.
Little Feat. So he's involved with that band. And this is long before Van Halen or the Doobies.
Yeah.
At least the Doobies with him here.
So does he track in this room here?
He kind of worked between Studio 1 and Studio 2, depending on the band.
Van Halen being in 2, all the records.
Except for Van Halen 1.
That was
Van
done
Halen
in here?
1 was done here.
Oh, wow.
In this room.
So when they come in, you're working here.
I'm working here. I saw these kids come in. They're out there playing basketball.
Yeah.
They were, young and spunky and full of life.
They're like your age.
They're younger than me.
Yeah.
But they're like my age. But
at the time,
time, they're a few years younger. Eddie is I don't know, is probably like 4 years younger than me, something like that. And but they're out there, and they're just I think they brought him in first to do demos. They did a couple demos
with Gene Simmons or with.
No, I think when they signed him to Warner's.
Gotcha.
They did a song or two. That's my recollection. And then they rebooked and came in I think it was 77.
Yep.
So they were mixing in December of 77. So I think they came in and started tracking around October, November.
Right.
And they did a record in 5 to 7 days.
Unreal.
Yeah. I remember that Pretty Woman song. They came in on a Saturday and had it in the can and mixed on the Sunday.
Oh, on the Diver Down record?
Yeah. I mean, they wanted a single, and they made that single over the weekend, and it was like on the radio a week later.
Well, that's the famous story where the label is like, "Hey, we need a single." They're gonna play like Us Festival and stuff. And then they track that song, it becomes a hit, and they go, just stay in there and do a record. They don't got any songs, they just do a bunch of covers. Yeah. And that's a pretty wild story, Like Van Halen's interesting because it is so known for Sunset Sound, Ted Templeman, LA band, and they did the 5 records in here.
They did. And then Eddie says to me, I think they were having a little riff with the producer and Warner's, and he wanted to build his own studio. So he asked me about a few people and wanted some recommendations on construction people and who to build a console. And I saw the writing on the wall there because he's going to build his own studio. So and he did. He built it up his house on Coldwater Canyon and did a really nice job and hired top-notch people and built 5150.
You ever go up there?
Yeah. He had me up there when he finished it and showed it to me and did it, fantastic. I had an API board in there at the time, custom API board, and produced all the records after Diver Down up there. So 1984 and those records. And then I'm not so sure that Ted was involved in those.
No, it was, I think it was I think they had the dude from Foreigner, Mick Jones, worked with him for a while. And,
I think he had a little falling out with Ted.
Yeah. At what point do you get this Neve board? Because everybody has seen the Sound City documentary, and it was all about the board. And, when I was younger, I worked with Bill Bottrell. And he had 2 Neve sidecars. Yeah,
he was a big Neve guy.
Yeah, the small ones. And Neve was just this thing. And then when you watch this documentary, you're like, wow, man. Yours is spectacular. First of all, that thing's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, that's one of 3 boards that were built by the factory in that configuration as an 8088. And that's the biggest one that the factory ever built.
Were you involved in ordering that, or your dad?
No. Let me tell you about. So I'll roll it back just a little bit. That in the 70s, we had always built our own recording consoles or had them built to our spec, and they were basically always kind of API type bass boards. And from the 70s through most of the 80s, we had almost the same 3 boards in each room. I mean, the same board in each room. So there are 3 of very similar API type boards. Around later 80s, 87, automation was coming out. And we had
flying faders
and GML. So we had gone with GML automation. And George Massenberg was a client for a long time here before he built the complex and was his own studio. And I was looking for a board to replace the Studio 2 board because it just was, we were outgrowing the inputs. We needed a bigger console. And we were looking at, what was out there that was different because we never were cookie cutter. Oh, let's get an SSL or a Trident or a Harrison or something.
Trident was hot for a while.
They were, and there was certainly there's nothing wrong with the Trident. It just, we weren't a Trident house. We were more of an API house. So we kind of got talked into this AMEC board, and partially because George said, it's got my automation. They'll work with you. They'll build you a custom board. Anyway, we ended up putting that in, and we had it in there for, I don't know, half a dozen years. And, we just had a lot of problems with it. I'll just say that. It wasn't the board we thought it would be. So I started looking back and going, we got to get back to our roots, and which was, we were always a vintage house with a vintage console and a great sounding board. So I said, we've never had a Neve, and I think it's time to locate a Neve. And I probably spent a year and a half looking for a Neve. I remember I talked to Pete Townsend. He had one for sale. He shipped us a couple modules. We looked at that. It wasn't big enough though. And then we were looking at the ones in town. They weren't that big. They were kind of like Sound City, not bad boards, but again, we don't want to put the same size board in. We need something bigger, and more elaborate. And plus, this is Sunset Sound. We can't go backward. We got to go forward.
Right.
So I found out about this console that's for sale up in Canada, in Toronto, and it's a big Neve. And it's an 8088, which is the last of the discrete boards that were made. It was 48 inputs, which was unheard of for those consoles. And supposedly it was in pristine shape. So I flew up there and a broker had it, and it was from the Canadian Broadcasting Company. They had it. So I come to find out, I'm looking at it and I go, this board's in great shape. It's all packed up. It doesn't have the heavy use because it wasn't in a recording facility.
Right, no
cigarettes. Is it the CBC?
Right,
It's like a corporate run, broadcasting.
Suit and tie guys.
Suit and tie, yeah. They're probably doing, using 10 channels of it or something. So anyway, so I end up buying it and I bring it back.
How much you buy it for?
To Los Angeles. It wasn't cheap. It was almost $200,000.
Right.
Because it was a vintage Neve, and
What year is that board?
So that's okay. So the board was built in around 78, 79, and that's right before they went to the Neve V.
Right.
And all the discrete stuff was gone. And that was like a Rupert Neve design. That was the last of the
Holy Grails,
the last of the discrete type boards, correct. So I get it back here and I start digging and do some more research on this board. It turns out the first owner is Rumbo Records, which is Captain and Tennille.
Whoa.
So they ordered the board.
They did?
They did. So they ordered the board and they had it for a few years, and then they got talked into the Kool-Aid. Like, you've got to get the new Neve that's coming out. You got to get rid of the old one. You got to get the new Neve V.
3 years old.
Yeah, it's like 3 years old.
Yeah, it's old.
So we'll take it back and trade, And they're like, oh, okay, great. And we'll finance the new one or whatever they said, So they've only had it 2 or 3 years. So Neve takes it back and they get their Neve V, which I'm sure probably after several years they weren't as happy with. But anyway, so this board, Neve has it, and they probably don't know what to do with it, and they broker it out and sell it to the CBC.
Yeah.
And so we're the third owner, and what's so interesting, it's full circle. It starts in the Valley and comes back to Hollywood.
Wow.
Through Canada.
It goes from Valley to Canada to back here.
Yeah.
When you get it here and you set it up, of course, word probably hits around town because people love that warm Neve sound. Does it generate actual more business because of the board?
Oh, absolutely. It's, Sunset Sound finally has a Neve. And, we used to rent sidecars, rent modules, but now we got a full-blown Neve. And we didn't just bring it back and put it in either. We had this phenomenal guy, this Fred Hill down in Tennessee, completely modify it. We added sends, we cleaned up the relays, changed all the pots. We spent like 9 months or so, almost a year, rebuilding the board, even though it wasn't in bad shape, but just modifying it and rebuilding it, because that's kind of what we do here. We just tweak everything and modify it. And so that board was installed around 1995, and it's been in there ever since.
1985?
No, 95.
Oh, 95.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Let's get a little bit into, you have all these vintage mics. Mm-hmm. And if you've never been in a recording studio, people listening, of course, probably 99% of the people listening haven't been in. The key to the huge studio success are their microphone selections. Of course, you can rent mics, but you want to have these old Neumanns. You want to have a Neve board. You want to have all kinds of different mics, ribbon mics, and even this reverb chamber you guys built here with that RCA mic in there and stuff.
Right.
But at what point is your dad buying these mics in the 60s new, or what's going on there?
So, yeah, acquiring microphones is kind of an art, and he started very early buying microphones in the early 60s. Some of the popular mics back then were these Sony C37s. We've got like a dozen of those. The RCA ribbons, those were popular. We have quite an extensive number of those. We started acquiring some Neumanns. Over the years, I remember in like 64 or 5, him telling me, oh, I bought this studio, Lock, Stock, and Barrel. I think it was out in Nevada, like Vegas. And I just bought everything because they had such a pile of mics. So we got this Neumann console, which is kind of an oddity.
Whoa.
We had that for years.
I didn't even know they made a console.
I didn't either until I saw that. But we had this Neumann console that he used. It was kind of his personal little. It was a small little console, but it was nice. But we got a lot of mics on that deal. We got like Telefunken 251s, we got Neumanns, 87s, 67s, 47s. We were fortunate. So, and then as time progressed, when mics would come up for sale, and I was here, I was always in the market to buy some, whether it was an estate sale or someone just saying, I got a mic or this or that. And then around 1980, 81, I bought Sound Factory, which is down the street. That was our sister facility.
Oh.
And that was a 2-room facility, had 2 great API consoles, and had an extremely extensive microphone collection.
So you just bought it for the stuff and then closed the studio?
No.
Oh, you ran it?
No, bought it, and then we started up and had that as our sister facility for 35 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so
you guys are just booming, man.
Yeah, we had 5 studios going.
I mean, and when you think about it, right up until, I would say, Pro Tools really smashes, you got these guys with these ADATs, it's gonna shut down the studio, and you're like, really? This sounds like shit. But there is so many records made from, say, 80 to 90. The amount of records that were made in that period, I think, are more than any other period, because it was just all kinds of music going on. You got all the rock and roll, but then you've got all, you start to hit with some hip hop in the late 80s into the 90s, and there's just all this music being recorded. So you gotta be just killing it, because I remember studio lockouts would be crazy money. You go, I want to come in and do a record for 2 weeks, and it would, you look at these record budgets, what these bands all...
2 weeks? We had, that was back when we had artists coming in for 6 months.
Yeah.
And not leaving the studio.
Yeah.
It was like,
just a full lockout.
Lockout.
Yeah.
We had Yes in here doing Big Generator. They did that follow-up to 90210,
Yeah.
They were in here for 6 months, in this room. 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah. That was crazy.
When you see that kind of stuff, the security in that has got to be incredible, right? You're like, well, this record right here is going to make our net for the year.
Yeah, it was a good time. I mean, Smashing Pumpkins, Adore,
Yeah.
they were in for like 4 months.
Wow.
You know,
Who was the longest for one record?
that Big Generator comes to mind. That was a long gig. I mean, our longest client was Prince.
Right.
You know, at 9 years.
9 years.
Yeah.
So I want to get into Prince, of course, because he's one of my all-time favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Purple Rain, masterpiece, of course.
Yeah.
But Sign of the Times, which was done here,
Yeah.
I had no idea. I went to his place a couple years ago out there.
Paisley?
Yeah.
Park? Yeah.
This is an interesting compound. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it was really bizarre. It was just kind of like this warehouse kind of structure. Mm-hmm. You're just like, wow, this is it, you know? I always thought he did all his records out in Minneapolis. No idea. So he tracks the bed tracks in Minnesota or something, right, for Purple Rain? And then
Purple Rain was, I think, a live concert.
Oh, yeah.
Live. And then he brought it in here and did overdubs and mixed it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he just says, I'm here and you got to build Studio 3 for him, or how does this happen?
No, Studio 3 is already built.
Yep.
He comes in around 1981, and Studio 3 had been there since 77. So he comes in, he worked a little in Studio 2, but he likes Studio 3.
Right.
So he camps out in Studio 3 and does 1999, he does Purple Rain, he does, you know, Sign of the Times, he does
The Time, Morris Day.
he does all the spin-offs. He does the Wendy and Lisa, The Time, he does Morris Day, he does Apollonia. He always has the women with him. Right. And a lot of them, you know, he records. So Sheila E., you know, all that stuff, all done in Studio 3. And with our people, with Peggy McCreary, which was a great staff engineer, and David Leonard, and works a lot with them. So he's in from like 81 through almost 1990 straight, like nine months out of the year.
So did he say, I want this completely forever?
Until he builds Paisley Park.
Of course, but I mean, is it just a 9-year lockout?
No, he would be in the studio for about 9 months. He'd go back in the summer, back to Minneapolis, when it was probably really nice, you know.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to be there in December or February, but
yeah.
But you know, in the summer it was probably great. He went back there, but he would be here roughly about 8 or 9 months solid in the studio. He was a real prolific guy.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of the material that he recorded in there has never been released.
I know.
There's many shelves with many reels of tape on it. That's, you know, I think eventually the estate's going to release them.
Now, I was lucky enough to hang out with him for a 24-hour period. Could be one of the most interesting guys I've ever met in my life. Were you seeing him day in and day out? Were you hanging out with him? Because I heard he was shooting hoop back there. There's a basketball thing. He loved to shoot hoop. Of course, there's the famous Charlie Murphy stories of playing basketball. And I wondered if it was done there, you know, the Chappelle stuff.
I saw that. That was pretty funny. He was a big basketball fan. He would always work his way part of the day out to the courtyard and play basketball and have his like platforms on. Yeah, that was hilarious.
Basketball and platforms.
Basketball and platforms. And you know, but that was such a meeting place for us here at Sunset Sound. I mean, it still is, but it really was back in that day, where you'd have Prince out there and he'd be mingling, and it would be such a bizarre collection of other artists that could be out at the same time, whether it was Cher or Elton John or Toto guys or you know, or Barbra Streisand. You know, it's like there's Prince, and then he's talking to them. Yeah. You know, and some of them, you know, he kind of collaborated with and actually ended up doing projects with, like Sheena Easton. Right. I think he met her here at Sunset Sound and ended up doing Sugar Walls, doing other things. I think he even dated her, I don't know. But yeah, he met a lot of people. A lot of people met a lot of people out on the basketball court.
Man, that's so, there's nothing cooler when there's a studio with multiple, studios, because when you are tracking a record, it gets a little monotonous. You get a little lost. I compare it to Punch Drunk from Boxers. It's that headphone thing. You've had headphones on too long. You don't know what the hell's going on. You step outside, you get a little air, and then, oh shit, Eddie Van Halen right there.
Yeah.
Or Prince, or Keith Richards. You're just going like that. Wow.
Yeah, and it's good to get out of the studio.
Yeah.
So get some sunlight or some fresh air, or have lunch out there, or shoot some hoops. Take a break.
How does the name come up? Was it immediately called Sunset Sound?
Yeah, I think my dad coined that term. Because we're on Sunset Boulevard.
Yep.
And I think he said that he thought that would be so appropriate to just call it, Sunset Sound.
And who did the logo? It's fantastic.
So the logo we currently have now, I was part of. I basically, that wasn't our original logo.
Right.
So we've had a couple logos in between, but when those movies came out, I'm trying to think of what the name of it. We kind of ripped them off I did on their logo, because it was so groovy 60s.
Right.
I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it's eluding me right now. Anyway, so that's kind of where I got the idea for that.
Like the blaxploitation films or something?
No, it's
it'll come to you.
Yeah.
But that logo's fantastic.
Yeah, so that was probably late 80s, that kind of thing, when I came up with that. I had a graphic people kind of put that together. And
isn't it funny to think that the Stones, they're iconic. They got nothing but great records, but the iconic Exile, of course, is done in Keith's mansion in France.
Right.
And later I read, I think a couple years ago, somebody, it might have been Mick or somebody, said there's all this talk about us doing it in the dungy basement of Keith's place, and there's the great photo book of it, and you can see all the photos. But he goes, really, we had to fix all that shit in LA at Sunset Sound, because a lot of it was recorded badly and wrong, and that at one point they've got the mobile unit there, and they're like, we got to get out of here. There's just too much drugs. There's people coming
hanging
over.
On.
Yeah, hanger-ons, those really weirdos and stuff. And it's funny because you don't hear as much as you should about what key part this studio had on that masterpiece record.
Yeah, so they came here
72?
In 72. I believe it's 72. And it wasn't the first time we worked with them.
Really?
We worked on Let It Bleed and...
Did they track Let It Bleed here?
It's a little unclear what they did. That was a little before my time, but
right.
They did work on it here. I know we used to master their records. We had a mastering facility here. And because I remember when I was working here, we were mastering Street Fightin' Man. Ooh. And I was like, oh, what a great song.
Ooh.
And so we did some of Let It Bleed. We did, what's the other album? Give Me Shelter or something like that. But I think it was 71, so they come in and they come in this room first to do overdubs. And we have pictures of them in here.
Yeah,
they're doing vocals, they're doing guitar overdubs, Keith Richards, stuff like that, hanging out like right against the wall, right there.
Yeah.
And then they take it into Studio 2 on that Sound Techniques, and they want to mix on that. So they mix the record in there, and Jimmy Miller was the producer, and they finalized the record in there. Now, a couple years ago, there's a 40th anniversary of Exile on Main Street, that was released,
Yeah.
a box set.
I got it, yeah.
Yeah.
With the cards and everything.
Yeah.
the
So
postcard.
Mick comes down for that, and he's hanging out with us and talking. They're interviewing him, and he's talking about making the record. He's sitting in the lobby, and he's kind of going through what they did, and which was kind of cool, to have that. And then, in the box set, I obviously were pretty mentioned too.
Right.
But yeah, it's one of those iconic records that was done here.
Well, at the time, if you think about it, the Stones are the biggest band in the world.
Yeah, because there are no Beatles.
Yeah, there are no Beatles.
Right.
And they're in here. So a lot of people, that has to put a lot of people on the track of the studio that may not have known about it, because all of a sudden, here comes Zeppelin. Right?
Yeah, that's
and Zeppelin seemed to record a lot of places that the Stones would be at.
Yeah.
So the Zeppelin, they record full Led Zeppelin 2 here and 4 or overdubs? Or
So they record some of Led Zeppelin 2 here.
Yeah.
And that was Andy Johns, who's not with us anymore. But,
Genius.
yeah. So Whole Lot of Love, I think, was recorded in studio too. So they come, I don't know how long they're here in 70. That's 71-ish, I don't know. 70, whole lot, when Zepp 2, probably 70.
Yeah, 70.
70. And then, they would always come to LA for an extended period of time and tour, play the Forum, whatever. Because I remember I was fortunate enough to always see them when they came to town.
You went to see him?
Oh, yeah.
At the Forum?
Oh, yeah.
Did they get
Every
you
time.
in? Your dad get you in?
No, just got myself in with tickets. I have a crazy story that it's hard for me to even believe it was real. But I was in the Rainbow one night with a friend of mine, and Mario was the head maitre d'. And he knew Mario really well. And it was pretty late, probably midnight or 1 o'clock, something like that. I remember I was eating with him, and there was a table across from us. And it was raining outside. I remember that. It might have been a Sunday night or something. And there was these people eating, or they were sitting there. It was a guy, a girl, another guy, and a girl. This big, boisterous guy comes in. And he's yelling, "Where's my blippin' limo?"
Yeah.
And I go, "Oh my God, that's John Bonham."
Whoa.
And I'm like, "That's unbelievable." I go, "Oh yeah, they're in town." He goes, because they would hang out on the Strip. And so he's mad as hell that his limo's not there to pick him up, and he's out in the rain.
Yeah.
And I think it was Peter Granite sitting in the booth.
Wow.
The big guy,
Yeah, of course.
And he's like, "Bonzo." He calls him Bonzo. He goes, hey, chill. We called the limo. Just go outside, get it, relax, So meanwhile, this girl, this waitress, is walking by with a pizza.
Yeah.
And he's got a bottle of brandy in his hand that he's swigging.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm just in awe. This is like 10 feet from me. I'm looking, going, what? And this girl comes by with a pizza. He grabs a couple slices and just starts eating them. And she just kept going like without a glitch. It was like, what was that all about? Who gets away with that? Anyways, swigging this, he's eating the pizza. Okay, I'll go outside, So he disappears for like 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm with this friend of mine, Manny, and I go, "What was that all about?" And he goes, "I don't know." He goes, "That was crazy." So Mario comes over to the table, I don't know, maybe about that time. He comes back in.
Oh.
Now he's really pissed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because the limo hasn't showed up.
It's not there.
So right as he comes in, they're plating the food on the table.
Yeah.
With all these people, the girls and the guys. And he comes over and he's just, profanities are spewing.
Yeah.
And he grabs the tablecloth and yanks it out.
Yeah.
And all the food goes over everyone. and he's just storms out.
Oh.
Just pissed. And Mario's there with us, and we're like, "Mario, what's the deal?" And he goes, "Oh, happens all the time." He goes, We just billed the record company, and they paid the bill.
Wow. Oh, that's so great. We just built the record
I mean, it's
company.
just, it's almost like a makeup story. Like,
Yeah.
who could do that?
God.
But those were rock and roll gods. I mean, they could do anything they wanted.
Well, they had their own table there. That was their fucking place.
And you know, they were at the Riot House down the street.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
probably heard the stories. They're throwing television sets off the balcony
Yeah.
and riding motorcycles up and down the hallway.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was when rock was really rock and roll.
Did you ever get close to the guys in Zeppelin? Like, because you're at an age, by the time they come back for Zeppelin 4,
Yeah.
which is, you know, a monster record.
Monster record.
Are
yeah.
you talking to these guys? Are you around?
You know, I'm around. I'm not really working here yet, but I remember coming down here, and I tried my damnedest to try and get in on the session.
Yeah.
Closed session. Of
course.
They had a big sign on the door, closed session, no entry. You just could not go in unless
Yeah.
you were invited, because they were deep into Zeppelin 4. The first mix on Stairway to Heaven was done here before they did it back in England.
Unreal.
When you get the new box set of Zep 4, they've got the Sunset Sound disc
Yeah.
of all the stuff that they did it here that was not released up until then. And the way the story goes from what the staff had told me, that they had every musician in town coming down to Sunset Sound, and they're playing them like Stairway to Heaven and parts of this of this record.
Unreal.
I mean, when the levee breaks, that was mixed in studio too.
Unreal.
Yeah, on that Sound Techniques board. Yeah.
Wow. Here's something I wanted to talk about. When I came in, we were talking about the landscape of what's happening in Hollywood, and also the buildings are going away, classic stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you were ever going to the Comedy Store back in the day to see comedy, but there's a few of the old hanging on. Comedy Store, Whiskey, Rainbow, Troubadour. Of course, COVID could change the landscape again.
Could.
Really brutal. But another thing that's really changed, of course, was Pro Tools and record budgets and all of that.
Yes.
How do you possibly survive in this kind of climate? As not, let's say, not even COVID in the mix, but what happened over the years? You have 3 of the greatest studios on the planet, and record companies that are like, well, they got a $5,000 budget, you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
You're right. It's kind of like the perfect storm. There's a lot of issues there. I guess I would first say that, a lot of studios across the nation, mainly the 3 capitals where they're at, Los Angeles, New York, and down in Nashville, have disappeared, especially New York, because of the value of the property.
Of course.
And if you didn't own your property, or even if you did own your property, you were getting such massive offers to sell the property that it didn't make sense to be a recording studio. I think we're very fortunate here is that, most of this property here we own. So I don't have to worry about that. But the other thing is that we do have to worry about, to some extent, is, technology has changed the landscape, number one. So people now, in the old days, when tape was up and running, to make a record, you had to come to some sort of recording studio. Even if it was in the home and it was a personal studio, you had to have a tape machine, you had to have certain things to make a record.
And be able to make noise.
Yeah. And it just, technologically, you had to go to a studio, some sort of studio. Maybe not a professional studio, but you had to go to somebody that had a tape machine and somewhat of a console. With the advent of Pro Tools, when it got solidified and actually sounding good, you could make music on a laptop. So you didn't necessarily have to go to a recording studio for everything, or maybe not at all if you were doing certain kind of genres of music.
Yeah, a lot of people were coming in, they would get the drums and then go home and do the rest.
Yeah, do the tracks here. But, we are a tracking facility. We're 3 rooms, and that's what we're known for, outside of mixing also, but, we're a tracking room. So we do contained bands. So people that have contained bands, it's hard to get them to sound good in a living room. I mean, you can do it, but so if they had a budget, that's what we were getting. So that's how we tried to stay busy with bands and doing that type of music. But as you say, with record companies' diminished returns on their product and budgets shrinking, it is challenging to keep the facilities going. Now, there's a lot less of them in town now, though.
Yeah.
I mean, in the heyday, probably in the 80s and early 90s, there was 300 recording studios.
300 in LA?
Yeah. I mean, I've got the list. It's crazy. The studio list, and you're like, look at these in LA. Well, there's nowhere near that now. There's a handful now. I mean, of studios at our level.
Right. So you got like Rick Rubin's Shangri-La.
Yeah. And that's sort of personal use, too.
Yeah, right.
But you got, Capitol, East West,
Right.
United, Conway, Village, these places.
Conway's still open, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I often have argued for years and have been on Lars Ulrich's side of Metallica, of, that whole thing of like, fuck the rock star. They're just greedy and they want money on this whole illegal downloading thing. Mm-hmm. At that point, I don't think people see your face or the guy engineering this right now, or the guy on the phone in the lobby, or the runner, or the janitor that comes in here and cleans.
Or the technician keeping the equipment going.
Keeping the equipment going.
Yeah.
What they don't see is the spill-off of what happened. And that is where the company's like, well, we're not going to give Sunset Sound $200,000 to do a record because we have to give this thing away now. Yeah. So I have no idea what the industry is anymore. I'm not in it anymore, but I look at it and go like, I really don't see what the record company, they go, wait, we give them money, they go do the record, we give it away, but I guess we get part of their touring or whatever. I don't understand it, So who's coming in? Is it just the bigs like Paul McCartney, Elton John, Foo Fighters? I mean, he's got his own studio, but...
Yeah, I mean, big guys do build their own studios. True. I mean, we're getting a cross-section. We're doing a lot of indie work and pop records still. And like you said, we're doing snippets of the projects. We're not doing the start to finish like the old days.
Right.
Let's track the record and then go all the way through it and then mix it. That just doesn't occur anymore. So, we're doing a lot of tracking, or we'll end up doing some mixing. It's just the way of the world because of the budget. The other thing that I might say is that prior to now, going back 15, 20 years, what fueled the industry was you made a record, and that's where the artist made the money.
Of course.
And then the touring that he did was to promote the record.
Of course.
Now it's completely the opposite.
Yeah.
They do a quick little record and try and spend
tour,
just so that they can sell it out on tour, but the money's in the tour.
Right.
Yeah, but with COVID, where's the touring? It's devastated. Every musician is out of a job right now. It's terrible.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It could, if we continue on and we don't see touring till 2022, it could rejuvenate studios like yourself, where bands go, you know what, let's go back to the old days, because who wants to make a record in their house right now? We've been in our houses for 6 months. Yeah. Let's get the fuck out of here and let's go to a studio and we'll quarantine in the studio and make a record old world way.
Well, that's true. I mean, we've seen some of that, and we're hoping for more of that. It's just that it's probably got to be self-funded, or it's a big enough band where a record company or a management company will pay for it.
Yeah. What do you see the future of Sunset Sound? Of course, there are some incredible things I see here. You could easily start doing an amazing YouTube channel on the history of this place and stuff like that, where there's revenue. You can also do shoots in here, some kind of classic shoots. Like I would love to do a podcast in here 4 times a month, just for the history of it. To interview these people in an iconic room just to soak up the vibes, because if stuff like this goes away, it's over.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of history here, and it's a shame. I mean, nothing lasts forever, but we're still here currently.
Yeah.
But we did start a YouTube channel recently, and we're trying to do get up and coming artists, and then hopefully iconic artists that have recorded here, to record songs that were done here. Yeah. And kind of post them on our YouTube channel, just kind of as a fun thing to do, and to promote them and promote us. And we're hoping that will bring more awareness to Sunset Sound and to them. And I think it's going well. It's kind of in its infancy, but it's
it'll take off.
But it's, you know, a lot of people are starting to view it. I think if the story was told right, it could be a marvelous thing to do here, to talk about the history of Sunset Sound. The problem is that, you know, my father was always very private in the sense of what he wanted to convey to me and the staff about not imposing upon the artists. So we never were snapping off pictures on people unless they were, you know, unless they allowed it. And there's same thing with filming. So plus nobody had an iPhone back then.
Well, I think in the world of animation and the world of the stories, we just walk down this hallway and then we start telling the stories about each record, and you animate that when you don't have photos.
Yeah.
And you also do it a lot like Dogtown and Z-Boys, where you're just dropping in, you know, the album cover and the stories are coming.
Or still photos or things like that.
Yeah, because that stuff, the studio, you don't necessarily need the photos as much as you are showing a picture of that microphone right there, and then the stories coming out of it, you know? Because these stories of who recorded in here is unreal. You know, and look at Sunset Sound, Sunset Sound City. Mm-hmm. That got a lot of traction.
It did.
And they swirled it around a board, the story.
Yeah,
but,
Dave Grohl did a great job on that.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's something here, man. When you got Zeppelin, the Stones, and Prince, those are 3 of the biggest of all time. You know?
That's true. I know. I mean, and every artist pretty much has come through here. I mean, and there were sectors where they were here for years. You know? I mean, whether it was Elton John or Jackson Brown, or, you know, I mean, I can go on and on. With the people that have been through here. But the story, you know, as you get older and people start dropping off, it kind of goes away with them, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think you're right. I know people that own a lot of rock memorabilia right now. Mm-hmm. I've been selling quite a bit of mine. Millennials don't care about rock memorabilia. So you have to sell it to people our age.
Yeah, that can appreciate it.
Why they're home right now with their money, like, man, I always wanted that old, you know, Van Halen sweatsuit. You know, and because it is a thing, but it really touches me, mostly because I was in the industry for a long time, and I also love every band that worked here. I mean, and you know, what people don't realize is when you put on a great record and you listen to it, number one, it's got to have the songs, or we're not going to be listening to those records ever again.
Yeah.
That's just all there's to it. Number two, is the sound of the record.
True. I mean, there has just been such great sounding records that have come out of here. Other facilities too, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
But they've just got such longevity, and I got to believe that it's the content and the sound. I mean, that's why kids still can listen to the Doors records and just be blown away.
And those are done 4-track.
3 to 4 track. Yeah.
The 4-track recording on that first record.
Yeah, for subsequent records too. I mean, we didn't get into 8-track until probably, Morrison Hotel or something.
So crazy.
Yeah.
So crazy. You ever thought of selling? Anybody coming at you? Or is it just you the rest of your life?
That's a good question. Probably is just me. My daughter's becoming she's almost an attorney. She's a lawyer, so she doesn't want to be in this. She wants to be in the business, but she doesn't want to be in this part of the business.
Yeah.
So, and to sell the studio for probably what the property's worth, it would have to be a boutique sale to someone who doesn't care about making money.
Well, it's almost a 2-thing sale. It's equipment to somebody, and then it's land and property to somebody else.
Yeah, and land and property in Hollywood is really gained in value.
It's bizarre though, right? Because if you think right now, I saw a thing this morning that really hit me where people are leaving because of COVID.
Yeah.
People are leaving because of the homeless problem. People are leaving because of the political climate of what's happening with decisions being made. And when you think about that, the guy hit it on the head. He goes, the people that are leaving are the people with money because they can leave.
Yeah, they can.
And you're going to either get 2 things. You're going to get Hollywood 80s style, where it's just a shit show, but some incredible art. Artists can live here again because, man, I got an apartment for $850.
Yeah.
You haven't heard that in 20 years. Or you're going to get just, they're building all this stuff. Who's going to pay? Who's going to move into it?
Well, I think you got a lot of media companies that are moving into, East Sunset Boulevard. Whether it's Netflix or Amazon, and I know what's on the drawing boards here, and there's huge developments coming in across the street at Crossroads of the World. That's going to be the biggest development in Hollywood's history. It's $1 billion. It's 9 acres that's going in there.
Wow.
And that would have already started, except for COVID. So
what's going in there? That was that old studios, right? It had that world thing.
Yes. So that's a historic landmark. They're not touching that. But the parking lots and the adjacent street and some other properties that are connected are all getting completely bulldozed, and there's like 3 towers going in there and a pedestrian walkway all the way up to Hollywood and Highland with shops and restaurants and hotels and apartments. I mean, it's going to be a destination spot like Hollywood and Highland.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge development.
I was saying if I'm alive, I'm 54 now. Let's say I make it to 74. 20 years,
so.
24 years from now, we are not even going to recognize this shit.
You won't recognize Hollywood.
No way.
I mean, it's just development after development. This COVID thing slowed it down a little bit, but I still think it's going to all come back.
It's crazy, right? And it all started up in the west part of Sunset when they're going to rip that whole block out where the Viper Room is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. They're putting in that
that weird
crazy looking hotel
spaceship thing.
Yeah.
And then, the House of Blues went. And,
oh, yeah.
And now that's a giant tower, And it's pretty spooky because there's going to be a ton of shit with nothing to do.
I mean, let's be optimistic. The COVID thing has to get rectified at some point.
Yeah, of course. But I'm saying, the classic nightclubs, the classic bars and clubs. I'm not saying we're on lockdown the rest of our life. I'm talking about
but will the Roxy survive? Will the Troubadour survive? I mean, these places are hanging on by a thread, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Whiskey, all these,
Yeah. Thank God they own those whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Troubadour, I'm not so sure about. I think they're having a hard time. But,
Well, I can't thank you enough for letting me come down here today. It's funny.
Well, lovely to have you.
I think probably 10 million people have drove by this place a month and not
What's that?
not even know
What's
who was
Sunset
in
Sound?
here. You know,
Yeah.
Prince, Zeppelin, Jackson Brown.
Right.
It's unreal. Van Halen, all the great, and they're driving down Sunset, looking at it as Running with the Devil is played on KLOS.
Yeah.
You know.
You know, it's one of my favorites always at Halloween time, which we're coming up on, is we did Monster Mash in this studio.
Oh.
You know that song they always play?
Yeah, I did the Monster Mash.
Yeah, Bobby Boris Pickett. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was done in here.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy little tidbits like that. Yeah.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah. Oh, and I remembered the movie that our logo, Austin Powers. So that was such a 60-ish type movie, and they had the flower power and the logo and everything. So that's where our logo basically emanated from.
And they can buy a shirt, right? Can people buy shirts?
We can. We have a whole merchandise section now. Shirts and hoodies and all kinds of things.
Is it sunsetsound.com?
Sunsetsound.com. It's our website, and just go to the merchandise section.
You got a fantastic Instagram.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
And the YouTube channel is just Sunset Sound?
Sunset Sound Studios.
Studios.
I think it's under that.
Yeah.
And it'll come up. Yeah.
How many years now? 50, 63?
Six.
Recorders. Sunset Sound Recorders.
Sunset Sound Recording.
It's under Sunset Sound Recorders. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. It's basically 60. So 60 years.
60 years.
60 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got a lot of good parking there.
We do.
Did you always have that?
No.
What was back there? Houses?
Houses were back there.
Really? And you
Yeah.
plowed them?
Yeah, we didn't have them right away, but my dad acquired them over time. We used to have the entrance off of Sunset Boulevard. You had to come in, and the basketball court was our parking area. So we used to stack cars in there.
Oh.
I mean, you couldn't, it's like, I got to leave. Well, you can't leave because you got 3 cars behind you.
Oh.
And then, think about it. There was no security back in the day in the early 60s. You could just walk right in off the street. That's how some people got a job here, actually.
Yeah?
They came in off the street and said, I really want to work here. I want to be a recording engineer. And I think that's how Bruce Botnick came in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy.
You just walk in, I'll say,
Just-
see Prince just shooting hoops.
Well, it's long before that.
I know that.
But yeah, to come in and just knock on the door and go, I'm looking for a job. I want to be working in a studio.
I tell you, just to think about Jim Morrison in this building makes my head blow off. He was here for a minute, a speck of time.
I know they were only a band for like 4 years.
It's crazy.
And look at the footprint they've left.
I talked to Robbie Krieger.
Yeah? Yeah, he's a good guy.
He is, yeah. And
He's a golfer, too.
Yeah. He's just kind of like, it was a long time ago.
Long time ago. At least he's still here. That's good.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man.
Okay. Thanks, Dean.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And don't forget to check them out on Instagram, their website, get some hoodies. I got a fantastic t-shirt. I love it. And shit, man, maybe you'll get a record deal one day and you'll call these guys up and do a record right here where all the greatest did them.